So every semester, I offer to my students that I'll review their resumes before the career fair. Several years ago, I got a resume, and the very first line appeared to me to have a misspelling. And I write back and I said, "Aaron, doesn't your name have 2 A's? Did you spell your name wrong?" And I didn't review anything else, and I sent it back. Sure enough, he spelled his name wrong. Okay, spell checking. That would be one of many of the things we'll talk about in this particular lesson, okay? So we'll go through the basics like that. We'll go through a little more in depth with what you should put in your resume, how to make a good first impression, and then hopefully you get to that interview and what to expect from an interview and some tips and tricks along the way. All right. First question I want to ask, what do they want to know? They being the employer, the company or the organization that you're trying to get a job with, okay? What do they want to know? And when I ask this question, students come back and they say, well, they want to know my GPA, or they want to know what classes I've taken or what internships I've had before. And yes, that's true, but the primary thing they want to know is that you'll meet their needs. Keep this in mind throughout this whole process, okay? They are hiring you to meet some need, all right? They need you to fill a hole. They need you to work hard. They need you to solve problems. They need you to be the new people in the organization who will eventually replace the leadership who's retiring, okay? They have a need, you're there to fill it. It's about them, it's not about you, all right? So keep that in mind, okay? Now, ultimately, they want to make you happy, right? They want to give you an employment opportunity that is enjoyable, something you'll come back to, something that you'll enjoy waking up and going to every single day. But ultimately, the primary goal is for you to meet their needs. They're paying the paycheck, all right? So again, keep that in mind. So we'll go through several categories and I'll describe what I think is important. Now, some of this is my opinion, and this is based on myself having internships when I was in college, and I've had 3 jobs since I've graduated in my career. And more important though, it's based on conversations I have all the time with employers, and they tell me what's important to them, okay? So we'll go through that, and I want you to convey these things to employers. First of all, research their organization and understand what they're all about. Where are their offices? What work do they do and what work do they not do? Okay, the worst thing is when you go to an employer and say, I want to be a structural engineer, and they don't do structural engineering, all right? Now, do your homework ahead of time. They really appreciate that, and they don't appreciate it when you don't do your research, okay? So convey you're a good match based on your research. First of all, what's your discipline? So within civil, environmental, architectural engineering, you tend to follow some sort of sub-discipline. So are you geotech, water, structural, construction, lighting, mechanical, whatever that might be? What are you and what do you want to be? Now, if you don't know, start thinking hard about what you want to be. And at least when you're talking to that employer, tell them you're interested in that particular discipline, okay? Which industry do you want to be in, all right? Do you want to be in heavy civil construction? Do you want to be in vertical building construction? Do you want to be in industrial? And when I say construction, there's not just the construction piece, but the engineering behind it, okay? So the audience for this particular lesson here would be either people who want to go engineering or construction for the most part, all right? And then what position are you seeking? So there are all different paths within each discipline. Do you eventually want to lead the design team for your engineering firm, okay? Or do you want to be the project manager? Or do you want to be a superintendent? So there are different paths. Now again, you might not know this, especially if you're going out for an internship, but if you do know that, convey it to the employer, all right? Do you want to work inside a lot? In which case maybe engineering, design is your thing. Do you want to get your boots dirty and swear and go out in the field? Well, maybe that would be construction, okay? And there's a combination of the two. But think through these things to know what you want, and then hopefully you can match what you want with what the employers need, all right? Location and travel. So depending on the type of organization and the industry they're in, it might require travel all over the world, and you might follow the work around the world. And it could be a small company, and all they have is work in the local area. All right, so make sure you jive with what they need there. If you don't want to move, if you want to stay in Colorado, and they have work in Texas and the Pacific Northwest and New England, then you probably shouldn't even talk, all right? So make sure that is in alignment before you go into these interviews or even start talking to employers, because why waste either of your times if you're not in alignment? Okay, Work experience, convey your work experience. And sometimes students come to me and say, I've never had an internship in engineering or construction before, so I used to deliver pizzas, I used to be a lifeguard, whatever the case may be. So I didn't put that on my resume, and I immediately say you should have, right? Because that shows you weren't just sitting at home playing video games on your parents' dime, okay? You were working, whether that was in high school or maybe now you're in school, in college, and you're working during school. So maybe you have a full-time engineering degree and you're also working. So if you're working 20, 30 hours a week on top of school, whether that's delivering pizzas or not, that shows you have a really good work ethic and you can manage your time and you're dependable. So convey all of the above. Now, what should rise to the top of your resume or your conversations should be the most relevant experience. So if you have relevant experience, put that on top, okay? So an internship with an engineering firm or a contractor or whatever the case may be. Make sure that's on there, of course. Even if it's not in chronological order, make sure that's at the top of your resume so that they can see it first, whoever they might be. All right? Again, things like landscaping, yeah, maybe it's not what you want to do eventually, but it shows hard work. You're out in the heat all day doing landscaping last summer. Put it on there. Military training, sometimes that doesn't relate as far as the technical training goes, but the work ethic, the leadership skills, the ability to work hard, that's something you want to convey. So I had a student who was a Coast Guard rescue swimmer. He put that near the top of his resume every time, and people knew he worked hard, okay? So convey that. You're not just trying to convey your experience, you're also trying to convey that you're dependable, organized, good with time management, and someone who's going to work hard. All right, education. So first of all, do you put your GPA down? That depends on your GPA. So if you have a 4.0, you probably want to put that down. That's something to be proud of. And especially if you're going into, let's say, structural engineering. We want people designing buildings who have that 4.0. All right? Now, this may come across as strange, but some organizations don't necessarily care that you had a 4.0. If you had the 3.0, but you're really good orchestrating people and you're a great people person, good problem solver, you like to get your hands dirty, they want you as well, all right? But if you have a 3.0 or a 2.5 or a 2.0, you might consider not putting it on there. Now, a 3.0 by no means is a bad GPA, but you want to differentiate yourself from the others. So there will be others who have the 3.8 and 3.7. And so in the resume and in the interviews, you're trying to make yourself different, okay? So that's up to you, whether you put the 3.0 down. If you have the 2.0, I'd suggest you don't put it on there. Now, when the question comes up, if it comes up, which by the way, it might not come up, but if it does, and they say, what's your GPA? The answer is completely honest. I have a 2.0 or whatever it is, okay? You don't embellish, you don't change the facts, all right? But you don't need to offer up a 2.0 GPA if nobody asks you, okay? Communication, all right? So every employer I speak to says they want someone who's good at communication, whether that's verbal communication or, more importantly in our work, written communication, technical writing. So if you can somehow convey that through your course projects or anything you've done in school, employers want to hear about it because we need to be good communicators no matter what we do out there, okay? Problem solving, all right? You can convey that quite easily with the projects you've done in school. Maybe you were the leader of your particular group in a big semester-long project, whatever the case may be. They want problem solvers. I've heard so many times, I might hire this particular engineering discipline, this major, for something that's not related, but I know they're problem solvers. I know they can pick up my business fast because they went through this engineering school and they went through all these problems that you gave them, okay? So convey to them, convey to the employer that you're that problem solver. Software, okay, list of software, particularly software that makes you different from everyone else. Research, if you did undergraduate research, for example, that would be something you want to put down. Are you multilingual? Okay, more and more that's becoming very important. All right, courses and projects, list those, but don't list the ones that everyone else has on their resume. List ones that make you different. Graduation date, don't forget to put this one on. Sometimes it becomes a homework assignment for the employer to try to piece together when they think you're going to graduate. They want to know that, just put it up front when it's going to be. the month and the year expected graduation. Okay? Any service you've done, so Engineers Without Borders, Habitat for Humanity, whatever the case may be, put that down. Okay? Maybe you don't have great employment already, great work history, but if you've gone to foreign countries to build water treatment systems and you've designed those systems and traveled and built those things, that shows work ethic as well. All right? So play to your strong suits. All right? Study abroad. Okay? Did you go away for a semester? That shows you're culturally aware of other places in the world and that you're willing to explore and try new things. All right? All of the above should end up in your resume through your conversations and your interviews. Okay? Personality and work ethic. So all the previous stuff, you could be about the same with other folks in your school, okay, in your discipline, in your major. All right? So now it's time to distinguish yourself from others. All right? How are you going to convey that you're a hard worker? So this is my youngest daughter. We just stacked a bunch of wood and I made her do it, but she loved it. And she's a hard worker. How do you convey that you're a hard worker? Whether you were in the Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts or whatever the case may be, okay, somehow convey that. Work it into your conversations. And you don't just outright say, I'm a hard worker. You don't put that in your resume because anyone can say that. Somehow you have to prove that you're a hard worker. Dependable. How can you prove that you're dependable? All right, that extra job that you take outside of school, okay, that might help to show that you're dependable, whatever the case may be for your personal life. Organized, all right, this may come through in just the organization of your resume or the email that you type. All right, so be consistent, be organized, punctual, show up early. Okay, whether that's an in-person interview or an online virtual type interview, show up early. Make sure you're the first one there. All right, don't let someone else wait for you. Be professional at all times. Be courteous. All right, these are the skills, these are the traits that they want in their organizations. Show that you're a leader. Okay, whatever the case may be for you, whether you're the captain of a team or you ran some sort of organization as the student chapter president, whatever that may be, make sure you convey that. That's the type of person the employers want. Hobbies. Okay, this one, there's mixed opinions about this out there. I think it's good. It shouldn't take up much space in your resume. You shouldn't spend too much time talking about it. But you'd be surprised how many employers pick up on something that they enjoy. So a student of ours had really good experience with music. In a previous lifetime, she did a whole lot of music. And lo and behold, an employer loved the fact that she did this, and they had a 30-minute conversation about playing music, okay, for an engineering interview. So you never know where the conversation will go, and that personal connection is huge. Okay, you could have the worst possible resume, but then all of a sudden if you get a personal connection, then your foot's in the door and you can work your way in a little better. All right, even better, you have the best possible resume and you make a connection, and then you're a shoo-in. Okay, so whether it's music or working on cars or athletics like skiing or art, or we had a student who flew airplanes. He was intending to go in the Air Force, and so he flew airplanes on the weekends. He saved up and got private pilot license lessons, and someone picked up on that and really enjoyed talking to him about that. Okay, you never know. But again, don't make it more than one line or so on your resume. So I've talked kind of broadly about suggestions with interviews and resumes and first impressions. Now let's specifically go through some tips for resumes. So first of all, honesty and accuracy. No question here. You just can't embellish. You can't exaggerate. State the facts, okay? But at the same time, brag about yourself, all right? Sometimes, especially as engineers, we don't brag about ourselves. It's really hard for us. You go to some of the other schools in the university, and they're really good at bragging about themselves, whereas we are not, okay? But this is the time. This is the time to toot your own horn, all right? So if it's accurate and honest, talk all about it. Okay, and make sure it's bold and highlighted in your resume, all right? And it's something that you want to convey to the employer, okay? Why are you different? Okay, and the previous bullet relates to this one. So all of you in your major are taking relatively similar classes, okay? You all have great grades from high school, all right? Generally speaking, you're all great students. So why are you different? Why should the employer hire you versus anyone else? So this is where you brag about yourself and you talk about the niche that you're in that makes you different. One page, all right? I gotta say most of you are probably in the category where your work experience, your education should fit on one page. Okay, unless you're coming from the industry, a non-traditional student who has a career before going back to school, then you probably have a one-page resume. The employer might read your resume for 30, 60 seconds, okay? They probably will read it more if they really like you, but at first glance, they're probably looking at it really quickly. So if it's multiple pages, that's just not appropriate. All right, so one page. Make sure it's a PDF if you're sending it electronic, okay? So if you send a Microsoft Word version, my version might be different than yours, and it could spill over, fonts get all goofy, okay? So make sure you send a PDF. Okay, numbers and dollars. So you're not trying to create a novel with your resume, because again, people won't be reading it for very long. So when you put a bullet down to describe something you did, put numbers to it. So I worked on 12 projects this past summer, worth $740,000, okay? Numbers and dollars draw my eye as the reader. So if you can put that in there, it's going to make my eye go to the place where you think it's important. Bold, so change the font to bold in some spots that you want to have the reader focus on, all right? So if there's a particular portion of your resume that you want the reader to really, really hone in on, make it bold, okay? Fill blank space, but don't crush the margins, all right? So sometimes if your paper's this big and you have all your words on one side, then that looks bad because you have all this blank space. But then sometimes you crush your margin and turn it into a 1/4 inch on all 4 sides. That looks bad too. Try to find a good balance there. Spell check. I mentioned the student who spelled his own name wrong. All right, do a spell check. You would be shocked at how many spelling errors I find when I review resumes. That's about as easy as it gets to run the spell checker. Proofread, okay? Proofread your own. Ask others to proofread it. Okay, we often say goofy things when we don't have someone proofread our resumes, so make sure you do that. The format, this is just my suggestion. Of course, you can do whatever you want, but arrange these in order of your strengths. So first of all, put your contact information at the top. Now, a photo or no photo, that's a personal opinion, okay? In one respect, you don't want to get hired based on the way you look. In another, it kind of helps people remember you based on the conversation that they had, and now they know what you look like from your resume. So I have mixed opinions about that. You choose, okay? Objective, I really like this one. Just a one line at the top. What's my objective? I want to work as an internship with a general contractor in the local Colorado area, okay? That could be an example. And you would manipulate that however it's true for you, all right? Education, okay? Talk about the discipline that you're in, the major, your expected graduation date, perhaps your GPA, training software, okay? Put that in there. No high school. All of you probably went to high school, so that doesn't distinguish you, and it's just a waste of space on your resume. Experience, okay, so industry experience or work experience, whatever the case may be, and generally put it in chronological order unless there's an important job that you had that seems more relevant, then put that at the top. It doesn't have to be chronological order, all right? Training, certifications, awards, scholarships, student groups, whatever the case may be, put those in there. That tends to be lower on the list unless you don't have industry or work experience, okay? Then that could take precedent. Personal interests, I gave you my opinion about that. I like it, one line, and I think that could open up a conversation for you, all right? So lastly, you could bring in examples of your work, all right? Now, if this is an in-person interview, you could bring in a hard copy of that AutoCAD or Revit, drawing project that you had to do, or whatever the case may be. So those would be my tips for resumes. And, make it nice and clean, concise, and I suggest following this order. And again, why are you different? What makes you different? How will the employer know to pull your resume out and contact you later for that interview? Okay? Lastly, clean up your online presence because they're going to check. And if you have something out there that's embarrassing or, something you don't want them to see, clean it up now. All right? You might as well start that process early. Okay, hopefully you got that interview. So they either call you or email you, tell you to come down to their office, or maybe they set up some sort of online virtual interview. And here are my tips for interviews. First of all, they were in your shoes once. All right, the people who are interviewing you tend to be the nice ones. Okay, they're the ones who want to get back into the college scene and talk to the college students. It gives them energy to come back and talk to you. They want to talk to you, all right? They're not trying to be intimidating. And, so think of it that way. They might have been in your shoes literally a year ago. Not literally, but they could have been in college a year ago, or 5 years ago, or even 20 years ago. But just know that they were in your shoes. So it shouldn't be something you're nervous about. All right, so think about that when you go into it. Now, at the same time, don't be unprofessional and kind of carefree about it. All right, it's still an important step along the way, but as far as being nervous goes, think about the fact that they were in your shoes. Be early. All right, I mentioned this earlier. Make a good first impression. All right, first of all, your appearance. So dress up. Now, in civil, environmental, architectural engineering, we're slightly dressed down compared to, let's say, the law school or the business school. They're suit and tie types. For us, we're more the get your hands dirty types, but at the same time, we're not shorts and t-shirts, okay? So, whatever you think is appropriate for the company you're going to talk to, wear that probably plus, probably step it up just a bit. Okay, you don't want to go in all disheveled. You also don't want to go in there with the tuxedo, right? And, you can probably gauge the sweet spot there based on the folks you talked to when you first met them. Okay, and, you get a feel whether it's in Denver, Colorado or Manhattan, whether you should dress up or not dress up so much. Okay, handshake. So if it's in person and if we're not in coronavirus times, okay, handshake would be very appropriate. And handshake with everyone, eye contact with everyone. Okay, so sometimes you might see someone who appears to be the boss and you go shake his or her hand and you kind of ignore everyone else. Okay, make sure everyone gets your full attention. All right, try to have confidence, not cockiness, but confidence. All right, bring your resume. Whether this is in person or virtual, have your resume ready, whether it's hard copy or ready to send it off by PDF or upload it to the platform, whatever the case may be. Have it ready in case they don't have it in front of them. Know the company. Do your homework. Again, similar content to what I talked about before. All right, when you have these conversations, have an icebreaker in mind. Now, hopefully they start the conversation, but you could say, I live near Colorado Springs. That's where I'm from. And I saw that you had a project down there, and I've been watching it every time I go home to see my parents. And, that is a cool job. Tell me about it, and then you have some sort of connection there. Clearly you research their company, and that gives them a warm, fuzzy feeling that you know a little bit about them, all right? Research typical questions and rehearse answers, all right? There are typical questions. So the classic, human resources type questions would be, what are your strengths? Or the harder one is, what are your weaknesses? Right? And the strategy there, or the tactic I should say, is to turn it around and make it positive. So what are your weaknesses? Well, I really like to kind of control things in the group. And, so I kind of micromanage that. But, what I've learned is I need to give people some room to grow. And, I've learned to just give them some direction. And then I check in on them periodically just because I have to, but then we end up working more as a team and less as me, telling them exactly what to do. So somehow start spinning it into the positive side and how you've changed, and ultimately by the time you're done speaking, it's a strength, right? That would be the way to go about this. Instead of saying, yeah, I just can't wake up before, 11 a.m., sometimes noon, and that's always going to be a problem with me. That's my weakness, right? You don't want to do that, okay? So what would you like about the company, and how will you fit in, okay? And, you probably need to do your research about the company and think how you'd fit in, right? That would be a typical one. Do you want to travel? Know your answer to this. If you don't want to travel, the answer should be no. But, I have to imagine you're somewhat young. You're probably not married at this point, and you probably don't have kids. You might have all of the above, but most of you probably don't. And now's the time to travel. See the world, meet new people, learn new cultures, okay? Experience other places besides where you grew up, okay? That's my recommendation, but regardless, know for a fact which direction you want to go, because that could be a showstopper if you don't align well. 5 years down the road, where do you want to be? Okay, so think, I want to be an assistant project manager within 5 years, or a senior project engineer. So do some research about the typical path through the company and through your discipline, all right? What sets you apart? How much do you expect to get paid? Now that last one's kind of difficult. If you get asked that question, how much do you expect to get paid? This is my personal opinion on how you should answer it. Now, other opinions would be, I want X amount of money, okay? I don't think that's appropriate, especially for college students coming out of school. You don't have a whole lot of leverage here, all right? So what I would say is this. I would say something like, I am really just looking for a position where I'll gain experience, and you're the company I want to work for. You know, I love your company culture. I think I'll gain so much knowledge working for you. I think it's such a good experience. That's what I'm looking for, all right? And I'm pretty confident you pay, you know, the industry averages, if not better. But for me, I'm really just looking to learn. I want to be a sponge here. So I'm sure you'll compensate me just fine. So that's my thought on how much to get paid. And they'll probably appreciate that and drop it at that, okay? Again, my personal opinion. Now, if you're negotiating your salary 15 years later for a senior project manager role, that's a different story, all right? But in this case, you don't have a whole lot of leverage coming out of college, all right? Technical questions. So the last bit here, they might ask you a technical question. If you're going into one of the engineering disciplines, not a contractor route, so structural engineering or geotech or lighting, whatever the case may be, mechanical, okay, they might ask you to actually work out a problem in front of them, okay? So sharpen up before you go to these interviews if that's the type of interview you're expecting, okay? Be positive, all right? And they might ask you some questions that get you a little flustered, but always convey that you're positive, convey excitement, smile, okay? A lot of good eye contact, all right? Try to overcome those butterflies and be confident, which will make you seem excited as well. Make it seem like you want to work for them, okay? You want to be that sponge and just absorb everything, all right? Be concise, okay? You can ramble on. Some people just ramble when they're nervous. Some people ramble just because it's their personality. Be concise. Answer their question thoroughly, but make sure you don't ramble. Body language and eye contact, okay? Sit up straight, sit at the front of your chair, okay? Don't slouch, okay? Don't cross your legs, okay? Don't cross your arms. Don't point, you know, the typical body language type recommendations. Find time to describe times when you worked as a team, when you had conflict, you had to solve problems, when you had to work 30 hours one week and you also had 3 deadlines in school, okay? When you had to have an ethical dilemma and how did you accomplish that? When you had a leadership problem, all right? Whether they ask you these questions or not, find time to work them into the conversation, all right? And if they never ask you and you never find time, at the very end, you could very well have an opportunity. So at the very end, they usually say, all right, that's all we had. Anything from you? Any questions for us? The worst thing you could do is say, nope, all set, you know, and get up, you're done, you were nervous, you get out of there, okay? You shouldn't do that. You should have questions prepared. The first might be, you know, would you like to hear about this experience? I didn't have a chance to mention it earlier, but I'd really like to talk about an ethical situation I had, and I think you might appreciate it, okay? And then you can work in whatever that story might be, whatever you think they'd like to hear, okay? Also, a question you might ask is, what's your typical progression? So eventually I want to be a project manager in your company. What does that look like? You know, how many years does it take? What kind of experience do I need to learn along the way? And then in your mind, you start getting to know your path forward, okay? How's your company growing or changing? Okay, this next one might be a really good one to ask, and they might not expect it coming from you. What are you doing in recession? Okay, I'm recording this during coronavirus times. Okay, so this might be a very pertinent question. And, you know, if they come back and they say, you know, we've never had to lay anyone off because of a recession or even in the most recent times with the coronavirus, and, you know, that would be a really good indicator that they're big and they can absorb these bumps in the road. Okay, now the smaller organizations, maybe they can do that too. But, you know, many folks out there, and I can't blame them, have had to lay people off. It's something you should probably know, okay? It's just another part of the equation to figure out whether you want to work for them. So part of this whole thing is you're trying to figure out how you can fill their needs, but you also want to make sure it's a good fit for you, okay? So this could be a question you ask in an interview. Lastly, make sure you don't leave without asking this one. What are the next steps? Okay, may I contact you if I don't hear from you in 2 weeks? Okay, and they may give you their business card, they may give you their email address, whatever the case may be. You don't want to leave and not know what the next steps might be, all right? So this is a nice quick one at the end just to see where things might go from here, okay? So those are my tips and tricks for interviews, first impressions, resumes. All right, remember the theme is you're trying to convey to the employer how you're going to meet their needs. Okay, so first of all, you need to figure out what their needs might be and then figure out how you best fit that equation. Okay, so thank you. Good luck out there. Hope it all goes well and you land the internship or the full-time position.